So we've got Alek Yerbury now, just about to speak.
So, over the last 6 months, not just here, but in other places up and down the country, there's been this persistent issue of self-professed asylum seekers, refugees, illegal immigrants housed in hotels. Now, for many people, this is the problem. But what is vital to understand is that this is a symptom of a problem. It's a symptom of a problem that has been persisting for not just months, but for years and for decades. Many, many years ago, if anyone here remembers, I know some will, and this was long before my time, back to the 1970s, in the days of the National Front, people would routinely say that their major concerns with the country were the economy, government corruption, and immigration. And for 50 years, people have been met with hostility and with denigration and abuse for even talking about these problems. And so as the years have gone by, these problems have only manifested on an even greater level than they ever have. And the silent minority, no, the silent majority. Because for decades, our people have been opposed to all of these policies, and for decades these policies have been forced upon us. But the real cause of this problem, of which mass immigration, lack of housing, a cost of living crisis, these things are symptoms. The real problem in this country is ignorance. It is the ignorance of a cabal of criminals who live in a perpetual state of ignoring what the people of this country actually think and actually want, who live in their ivory towers surrounded by diamonds and money, and then come to the people professing themselves to be leaders, who come to the people pretending that they know best when in fact they don't know anything at all. It is so common for our people to talk about this ignorance and to compare the left, the Marxists, the communists, the liberals, to compare these people to the Soviets, when in fact what these people are is less like the Soviets and more like the Tsars of Russia, who live in a state of absolute benefit, who take whatever they want and ignore every single person beneath them, believing that all their problems are fake, that all of their beliefs are bigots, and that all their people know nothing and that they only know best. They have lived for decades with the ignorance of a Russian Tsar, oblivious to the fact that if you treat people with that level of ignorance and a pathological arrogance for decades and decades, eventually the day comes when an entire people turn around and say, "Did you really think that we were going to take it forever?" Our people will not take it forever. And these people who for years have treated us like swine in the belief that they only know best are soon to be in for an awakening. They don't know it yet, but we do. Over 6 months, these protests, these meetings have persisted. But we must also not blind ourselves to the fact that they have not brought the change we want. It did not clear the problem of illegals in hotels in Skegness. It has not destroyed the plans for RAF Scampton. And we must understand why. It's so easy to believe that our function is to be putting pressure on the Westminster politicians, and that if only we could make them aware of the problem, they would address the problem. It's easy to believe that endless protest will cause change. But the truth of it is that our enemy already knows what we think. They already know what the problems are. They simply do not care. And as the time goes on, if we are to truly get the change we desire in this country, we need to take this energy and turn it from protest into genuine political action. We must challenge the enemy in a domain that they cannot ignore. It makes no odds to them if 100 people complain. It makes no odds to them if people march through a town. The only thing they care about is when their money and their power is threatened. And that is the only target that needs to be chased after. That is the thing that needs to be taken away. The likes of the Tories, who piggyback off of the concerns of people like us, need to be highlighted for the con men that they are. The likes of Labour, who profess to be the party for the working man, but at the same time find themselves increasingly devoid of actual working people and interested only in propping up the world's parasites. Some of our people might have turned and said, well, if it's not the Tories and it's not Labour, maybe it isn't the political parties, maybe it's the unions. But then you look at the unions, and in the unions you find people who talk about the need to get better wages for our people and the need to prevent our people from losing their jobs. But at the same time, when they think people aren't looking, will campaign for the borders to be opened to a colossal degree so that British workers can be rendered into poverty and unemployment, because they too, like the Labour Party, are con men. They create a problem to sell a solution. So what is the solution? The only politics that is going to offer any hope for our people is national politics. Nationalist parties. These are the only parties and the only groups whose interests are the people of this nation and not the money of this nation, whose only interests are to build the future rather than pillage the present. These are the people that need to be looked at. Whether it's the British Democrats, whether it's the National Front, whether it's the National Housing Party, these are the only people that are prepared to actually talk about the problems that this country faces. These are the only people that do not abuse and denigrate and spit on their own countrymen. This is the only way that our people will be saved. It's not a task which is easy. In many ways, it's the hardest task that our people could ever undertake. To turn a country around and deliver it from an enemy within is not an easy task. But at the same time, it is a task which is not impossible. The reason this enemy is invincible is because too many of our people believe that that is the case. The more our people believe that they have no power, the more powerless they become. But the truth is that our people were never powerless. They were merely led into believing that they were. We know that the support is there. We know that the desire for change is there. We know that the power for change does exist within our own people. It doesn't need the likes of communists or socialists or liberals or Marxists. It doesn't need the likes of society's garbage to tell us right from wrong. I do not need them to tell me what is right and wrong, because like all our people, we can decide that for ourselves. Our future is in our hands, not theirs. And that is the way it has always been. And that is the way it will always be. Soon to come will be a day when the spirit of this country will rise from the grave. A grave that has been dug by the left. And a grave which has been allowed our people to fall in by the right. The Tories who stand there and let it happen. Our people will rise from the grave. And when that happens, those who have spent 50, 60, 70, 100 years planning for our annihilation will themselves find that if anything is being annihilated, it will be them. They do not realise what they have done, because over the years that they have made it impossible for our people to be heard. Instead, they have only convinced us that coexistence with this enemy is as impossible as it is to coexist with a cancer of the brain. These people are a cancer. They are a disease that is destroying this country from the inside out. And it's a disease that takes the form of the hard left. It takes the form of their fronts. It's a disease that needs to be eradicated once and for all. And it needs to be made so that it can never ever return to this country. Do not believe that this is the end of our nation. On the contrary, this is only the beginning. So where do we go forward from here? If we think about what needs to happen over coming days, weeks and months, it's never going to be enough to just have a protest, an event where we talk about the problem. That is never going to be enough. The council, the MP do not care. They have made it plain through their actions that they don't care. So what we need to do is to start organising ourselves politically. We need to start organising to run our own candidates at general elections, at local elections, and we need to do it for a nationalist agenda. It is the only way that will work. This doesn't mean that you can run people and be guaranteed to win. But what you don't realise, and what these people over there don't realise, we do not have to win, not to begin with. All we have to do is to prove that it is possible to resist. Because once our people start to realise that to resist the likes of the left is possible, then they will turn out in their hundreds, then they will turn out in their thousands. Once they can see that it is possible to resist, that is when they have an objective to work towards. So what we must do now, going forward, is now we know that there are people here in Seacroft, in Leeds, being ignored, being abused. We have to do this on a regular basis. We have to meet here on a regular basis. We have to do it because the alternative is destruction. One of the most powerful things that you can realise in this struggle is that we have nothing to lose, because the objective of our enemy is our annihilation. And if we do nothing, it will be the end of our people. Once you realise that death is inevitable and that standing idly by means your destruction, you realise that by resisting this enemy, there is nothing to lose. It's a hard task, but it can be done. People have done harder things over the decades and the centuries, and they've done them with far less. And if our forefathers can do it, so can we. They're not better than us. Instead, we have just inherited their legacy. and it's a legacy that we cannot squander. So going forward from here, if we think about what's happened in the lead up to this event, we had previous events here in the year. Myself and a large number of our colleagues have been meeting here on Wednesdays to plan what's going on, to talk about what the problems in our area are. And we have to keep doing it. So if you live in Leeds, if you live here, if you are sick of being taken for a fool and robbed blind by the likes of that filth there, even if the council and the MP do not care and do not want to listen, we will. So join us when we have these meetings. Get in touch with us. There's people like David, who runs a group, Yorkshire Patriots. There's people here representing nationalist political parties. These are the people that we need to turn to going forward. Do not believe that you are just one person. Everything is designed to make you believe that you are isolated. The local councillor has his constituency surgery up by that centre on Saturday mornings. One by one he'll let people walk in and tell him what their problems are. But would he ever speak to people as a group of hundreds? No, because if he did, then the illusion of isolation that he propagates on his people would never be held. He would never stand here and talk to hundreds of his own constituents, because he could not isolate them, he could not lie to them, he could not convince them that they are the only person who cares and it's just them that has an issue. That's why they will never speak to you in meetings, in groups, and events like this and places like this. They will not do it, but we will. And this is the only way that our people will be saved. Now, soon, I know a lot of people came here expecting a march. So that is what we're going to do. Now, a march up to that roundabout by Tesco and back, that alone is not going to clear out that hotel. It's not.
No, but firewood.
That will not do it. But what we have to do is the only thing that matters. We have to prove that it is possible to resist these people. It is possible to make ourselves heard. We don't have to do it by screaming and shouting, because our enemies are watching and they know what we think. And the fact that what we think is how to get rid of them terrifies them. They know, when they've seen this today, that we are not isolated, and that in fact so many of our people think the same thing that we do, but they have just been suppressed by decades of fear and propaganda. Our enemies know that we are stronger than we look, and their greatest fear is that the day should come when our people will start to realize that strength. That is the mentality they behave with, and that is the mentality that must be torn down. I'm just going to have one more speaker today, a gentleman who came today representing a political party. If there's anyone else who's come here representing a political party, representing a nationalist political party, and you want to speak, please do, because this is your chance. But after that, what we're going to do is we're going to organise ourselves, we're going to collapse what we need to collapse here, and we're going to march up York Road, up to the roundabout and back. We don't need to block the roundabout. All we need to do is prove that we are here. For so many of those who have come today, all these left who say to them, get off our streets, what they don't realise, these are the streets that our people live on. These are the streets that belong to our people. And when they think they can drive our people off of the streets, that would not work, because what they would be doing is driving them to step from the gutter onto the curb and into their own home. These people do not matter. These people are insects, and they need to be treated like insects with the ignorance that they deserve. So we'll have one last speaker, and then we'll gather together and we'll march up York Road and we'll come back. And if anybody wants to chat, wants to talk about what the solutions are, please, I'll stay here for as long as it takes, and we can talk about what needs to be done and how we need to organise. But yes, that is what needs to happen going forward. I'll hand you over to our last speaker, John Lawrence.